Okay.
So here's the situation. The situation is the first thing is self-awareness.
Okay.
Every artist, every creative, every person needs to have some level of self-awareness.
Yes.
And then we want to keep growing that self-awareness, but you need to have some self-awareness.
Hmm.
And part of that self-awareness is getting to know how you work,
Okay.
how you organically work, how you show up in the world, like what's easy for you, what and how can you leverage may not be the best word, but how can you position yourself to do that more?
Yes. Yeah.
So there's two schools of thought, and both of them are fraught with peril.
I like that.
Yes. One of them is discipline. And just the word discipline is disciplinarian, discipline, military, discipline, things by routine, discipline, stuff people don't have, etc.
Mm-hmm.
So one is people make demands upon themselves to be, you know what? I need to be more disciplined. If I was more disciplined, then blah, 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 right?
Mm-hmm.
So discipline becomes the goal almost.
Yeah.
Then the other side of this is well, I need to wait until I'm in the mood. I need
Mm.
to be in that certain space so that I can create.
Yes.
And that can come up spontaneously or because of environmental things or substances or whatever you want to attribute it to, or just the right time of day or week or month or atmosphere, whatever. But I need to be in the mood, and that becomes very sort of like Neptunian.
Yeah.
Hey,
Mushy. Yeah.
yeah, and so then you may only do like 2 sessions of creativity work a month because you're waiting to be in the mood.
Right.
So, and here's what I've come to see is that people are either waiting to be more disciplined
Mm-hmm.
or they're waiting to be in the mood.
Right.
And both of those are the polarities. And I'm coming to my own space of offering up the third way,
Okay.
which is a whole nother, which we can have a conversation about that. But what I wanted to chat with you about today is what are the tells? What are the How can we help people become more self-aware as to which one of those is an easier start point for them?
Mm-hmm.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, I mean, there's always Swami Ananda's advice, which is the next time you're tempted to procrastinate, put it off, you know, and
Brilliant.
it is
Brilliant.
it is brilliant actually, and but it's not exactly addressing what you're asking for.
Well, yeah, because you are a master, in the worlds of human design and
Yeah,
astrology and
yeah,
other,
yeah.
which at its core is helping people to become more self-aware, right?
Well, for sure. I think the issue though is being aware and perhaps encouraged to know that you have a certain strength within you
Yes. Yes.
and that strength is far more creative than your awareness, your conscious mind, if you will, is able to be aware of. In other words, there's a strength within you that needs to be exercised.
Yes.
And of course, there's ways of putting yourself in the right position in order to have the opportunity, particularly with other people, to exercise that strength or that gift. But the funny thing is about that strength is it operates on a level that is beyond the reach of the mind. So waiting till you're in the right mood or trying to discipline that is, like trying to pick up something you're standing on. You know, have you ever been out on a carpentry job? You just suddenly try to pick up something you're standing on. You completely feel like a fool. You know, you're trying to make yourself do something that you actually naturally do just to get through the day, just to be yourself and get through the day. And yet there's so much more of a resource there that when exercised in the right way or at the right time, can become much deeper, much stronger, much more creative, go way beyond your expectations or your concepts of who you are or who you could be,
Yeah.
is where you get into in any hero's journey story.
Well, and this is what I want to tap into. I want to double down on people's innate strengths.
Yes.
Because a lot of times our culture says, okay, well, this, you're good at this, so now you have to bring this up to come into balance. And I
Yeah.
say, no. As an artist, you want to double down on your strength, build on this strength, and then allow the overflow to fill into the other side, whatever the
Yeah.
other side is.
I think, or, exercise your strengths, manage your weaknesses, and actually look to other people to
Yeah.
do those things that you're really bad at, because in order to have any strength, you've had to pay for it with something else. Not everyone is the renaissance person, the totally well-rounded person. That's not true. I mean, that's
So,
well,
here's what I've been working on. What I've been working on is this, which is a very interesting, I call it the third way, which is going
okay.
outside of the binary
Yes.
and going into this thing where I am consciously moving into creative sessions in order to um, lift up my state of being,
Hmm. Hmm.
to create a creative state of being, making that the primary choice. And
Hmm.
once I'm in that creative state of being, then start my creative work. So that the
Yeah.
goal is not the creative work, the goal is the creative state of being. And by default,
And there is a distinct feeling to that creative state.
there's a feeling, but I'm doing it every morning, between the hours of 5 and 7 a.m. So
Mhm.
it's like I'm doing the combo plate. I'm doing both, but I'm pushing both up against each other. The discipline of waking up at 5, right?
Yes, yes.
And then the feeling of doing certain things to create a feeling,
Mm.
putting them together so that it can be an overflow, and then the creative experience is coming from that. But what I want to do is so that's my third way. And what I want to open up to is like, are there other third ways so people can drop the binary and get into emerging, merging so they can emerge.
Mhm. I think the thing that comes up for me in hearing you talk about this is that if if you when you're in the zone, I mean, I hate those
Yeah,
J terms, but
yeah,
when you've got your groove, whatever you want to call it,
mhm,
you're in your flow, and just as you're saying, do whatever it takes to get you there. I mean, often for me, that'll be writing my journal or something. And, just make a breakthrough on something. And there's that place, that feeling, of having reached the creative state. In some ways, and for some people, that's enough to keep them from getting too depressed. Basically, it is a feed. You touch in with your source being. You know, and if you do that much during a day, you get to the point where, yeah, you don't lose your way. But the other thing that's really important about this is if you have enough experience with your creative dimension, if you will, or expressing yourself in a creative way, where you have the experience of getting into your zone or whatever, then the irony is that's your strength, but the result of the strength is that you're able to be vulnerable. And in being vulnerable, you are you completely open yourself, you're more flexible, and most importantly, you can tell the truth. What a concept. You have to be vulnerable enough to be able to tell your truth, and whatever anybody else thinks about that truth, um, Who cares? I mean, you did your part, right? And if you're doing, you have to be vulnerable to do that. You put yourself in a position where you do something like be humble. What a concept. And that you're surrendering to the moment. You're telling your truth to the other person. They can have whatever response to that that they want to have. But if you're being vulnerable to with them, they're likely, hopefully, be vulnerable back. And then you have a real interaction. A real, so if you're on stage, you have your audience, you are who you are, and you're being genuine. You're telling your truth through the role or whatever it is you're doing, extemporaneous improvisation or whatever it is.
Yeah.
You're being honest. They can feel that.
Yeah.
Your audience can feel that. And if you're not being honest
Yeah.
and vulnerable enough in order to be honest, to be in the now, if you will, to be in the cusp of the now through that vulnerability. If you're not doing that, you don't make contact with the audience. So nobody's listening. And, and you can feel it when nobody's listening. It's a terrible feeling, you know. Um, the experience.
We can feel that on the phone when we're talking to people.
Oh, totally.
All of a sudden there's no one there, and we feel it. They're watching something else, or they're reading an email.
Yeah, yeah, yes, yeah. Well, the other thing is what you can say in almost any situation is governed by um, who's listening to you. I mean, if they can't hear what you have to say
Mhm.
or all of what you have to say, you can only say part of it, right? And then you can tell, like, okay, that's enough. I can't really say any more in this situation. Then, of course, it brings up the thing that I'm sure you're after here is how do you behave as an actor, a presenter, a whatever? How do you behave in a way to cultivate the the other person to listen more than they ordinarily would? How do you catch their attention with something and get them to the point where they surrender, like they allow themselves to be vulnerable? You've got them, right? And there's a million ways to do that, right? I mean, you can act like a cat playing with food, you know,
Right. Right.
let it get away, chase it,
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
pounce on it, whack it around. Or you can be, whatever the role is, I suppose. That I just think that what I hear you talking about is getting down to the essence of that moment, that
Well, there's
erotic moment.
there's that moment, but I'm also looking at the thing of people showing up for their art on a daily basis, and
Yes.
how can they. One of the most challenging things I find is people engaging in a daily practice.
Mm, mhm.
And that said, starting, like just the act of starting. Once people start, I feel like most people kind of get some ground,
Mm, mhm,
getting
mhm.
leveraging people to start. So
Yeah, I mean,
looking at the polarities, looking at how we can massage that, but essentially people using their own self-awareness as to how they can do that. And
mhm,
that's where I felt like, maybe there's a handful of organic ways that can start prime the pump. There's the word, prime the pump on that process for different types of here we go, for different types of archetypes.
mhm. You mean
You know,
different kinds of people? You mean people who work differently, you mean?
yeah. So like, there's the introvert, there's the extrovert, there's the adventurer, there's the discoverer, there's the scientist. You know what I mean? Like, everyone's gonna have like a different. There's the lover, there's the joker. All those archetypes could have a reoccurring theme in terms of, oh, here's your portal, here's your way in.
This is how you get through. Yeah. What was I going to say there? Um, oh, just that, maybe you heard me say this before, but I spend most of my time recovering from things that I did because I thought they were good for me. Whether it's diet or exercise or meditation, even most things produce, if I'm doing it because I think it's good, or somebody told me it was good for me to do that thing, and that somehow they convinced me to do it, and then I do it. I'll usually injure myself or overdo it, or otherwise I'm a kind of person who has a little bit of a discipline addiction.
Okay.
So when you started out talking, I go like, oh yeah, I get it, you know. And then there's the blowback from that. It's like, okay, well, I tried to discipline myself. I injured myself. Here I am spending months recovering, and I'm not going to do that. So now, then I'm going to go blow back over to the opposite side that says, well, I'm not going to force myself to do things. I'm only going to do them if I really want to.
Right, right. Which is exactly what that polarity I was talking
Yeah, yeah. It's a
about.
it's a ping pong match,
It's a ping
basically.
pong match, and I want to create ways that people can work with their natural propensity as the road in, and then expand out. So,
Mm-hmm.
like for me, waking up every morning and doing about a half hour of pranayama, yoga breathing for 45 half hour, 45 minutes, is 100% like. From there, I just go right into doing some creative writing or
Mm-hmm.
creativity, creating a video.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, whatever it is.
I have a peak
I have no
experience.
idea. I
Huh?
have no idea why this is floating through the back of my mind.
Go ahead.
Um, Bob Hope's wife asked him,
I love it. Bob Hope is a Gemini as well.
yeah. Bob Hope's wife asked him, "What do you want me to do when you die? Do you want me to bury you? Do you want me to burn you? Do you want me to spread your ashes in the ocean? What do you want me to do?" And he said, "Surprise me." I mean, it just kind of blows my mind. You know what I mean? It's like, here he is dead, right? And she's gonna do something that surprises him.
That's such a great one-liner. Elizabeth Taylor, the famous actress, she had a writer in her contract, a caveat in her contract that said that the director or someone on the set needed to surprise her every day.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
It was written into her contract that she expected to be surprised every day
Yeah.
with some gift or some whatever.
Which really makes it even harder to surprise her.
Right, because now she's expecting to be surprised. Actually,
Well,
she's contractually obligated to be surprised.
well, I had a friend who had a really hard, she'd get really constipated. And so she had a hard time getting it out. And so she had this contract with her husband that if he saw her in the bathroom and she was in there for kind of a long time, that he would grab a kitchen knife and come busting through the door and literally scare the shit out of her.
Oh, oh,
That's a true story. I know it's hard to believe, but it's a true story.
wow.
So I don't know. I mean, unless you have the experience at some point of being in your groove,
Yeah,
what that feels like, and kind of develop a felt sense for what that feels like inside of you,
yeah.
and how the various ways that you get there. I don't know whether, I mean, how could you teach that other than to suggest that you will notice at various times that you have certain feelings that feel really creative inside of you, and notice is like, how do you remember where you put the keys to the car? You know, you notice what else is in the environment when you put them down. I mean, that's a clear exercise. You don't just put them down. You notice what's that little bottle is next to where you put your keys.
Right, a reference point.
Yeah.
So, so like I've noticed that some people say dancing. Dancing gets them into a creative space. Some people say listening to music, or listening to music and then moving to the music gets them in that space. Some people talk about meditating. Some people talk about drawing, accessing, the other part of their brain, movement. So
Hmm.
these are all known, documented ways of getting in. Um, I just wanted to find a way that people could self-reference, become more aware of who they are, self-reference those aspects. But I guess what I'm hearing you say is that it's also based on trial and error.
Well,
Just
I think it clearly is.
yeah,
It has to be. I mean, what does it for you?
right.
What, and valuing that moment, valuing that feeling that comes. Usually for me, it's where I learn something new, or say if I'm writing in my journal and I'm analyzing or writing about something that happened to me, some memory or something, and then all of a sudden I have this experience like, oh my God, that's what was happening. So there's that feeling like I'm making more contact with my reality or the reality of my life, or but it is a very specific feeling, very specific feeling.
So
And
mhm.
quite sure that everybody has that,
So
that.
yeah, some people have that reference and other people don't. What I've been playing with recently is creating in non-ideal states of being, or let me say it another way, creating in what I think is non-ideal states of being. So in
Uh-huh.
other words, having a state of being that's operating that I don't recognize as being creative,
Mhm.
and jumping into something that's creative.
Uh-huh. Well, it was, so are you making yourself do that?
I'm finding my way to do that as
Mhm.
as an experiment, because I feel like what I've been training myself to do is to be creative in any state of being, and then I'm not addicted to one creative state of being.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh. Well, I
Or
think once you're in that place, I mean, I would suspect that once you're in that place and you know how to keep it going,
right,
you would.
you naturally have that fluid. You would naturally have that fluidity. But what I'm sharing about is right now is the starting point.
Right, right.
Not being addicted to a single portal of entry.
Mhm. Mhm.
And I feel like that would offer up more opportunities.
Yeah, yeah. Meaning like, oh, I have to be really quiet, that I have to be in this peaceful environment. All those conditions that people are putting on themselves. Is that what you're talking about? So I can only do it
Yeah.
when these criteria are met. And you're experimenting with breaking down those preconceptions of what
Yes.
that would be.
Yes.
You see that bookshelf, that little bookshelf over there,
Yeah.
has 35 journals on it or something.
Okay.
250 pages each. That's like 11,000 pages or something. That's me,
Mhm.
getting into the place that you're talking about,
Wow.
right? You just start writing. You don't know what, you know.
So what part of human design would give us the indicator that would be yours? Like, you know what I mean? Like yours would be
Mm.
writing. Mine's I have movement. I have sound and movement, and I have breathing as two
Mm.
primary.
I think, say as a teacher, yourself as a teacher, just saying to people, I found these things for myself. This is what gets me in, so to speak. this gets me through the portal, as you were saying. And you clearly have that too. And they need to notice what they are, what gives you that feeling. I don't think you can predetermine, because everyone is completely unique. And in fact,
Mm.
it is that uniqueness that is their
Yeah.
creativity,
Yeah.
that they are. I mean, at our root, we are all mutants. We are all freaks. We are all, we're just barely feeling like we're getting away with not being somebody putting us in a sideshow and throwing tomatoes at us, right? Deep inside, we know we're different. And that is oftentimes very frightening to people, to be that different and to be that vulnerable. And yet creativity is very, very tied to that vulnerability, that deep melancholy, that threshold melancholic state that takes you into this creativity, which is inherently making something new out of something old, right?
Yeah.
That you're taking the fodder of your life, the way you feel like a victim, or the way you're, addicted to being machismo dominant, or, whatever your habit structure which is just you playing some kind of ridiculous role that doesn't really work for you, and then getting down into the nitty gritty of your lack of, you know, well, let's just say that creativity operates on a certainty uncertainty continuum,
Mhm.
that you have to allow yourself to be uncertain enough and vulnerable enough in your uncertainty to discover that frequency inside of yourself where you know that you're being yourself, where you know that you're being creative, and to be certain that that's your path. How you I don't think you can ever condition that into somebody. I think that's like you're
It's
breaking
not.
that
Yeah.
habit
It's
pattern.
not that. It's not that one would condition. One would use the tool of self-awareness to help support directionally, you know.
Mhm. Well, usually people have to be broken to get to that place, unless they're chaotic.
Awesome, awesome. Thank you, Genoa. Okay.
I mean, meaning, you take the hero's journey, you're in the second act, right?
Right.
The first slam comes, the person has their bag of tricks, they reach into their little toolbox, they pull out the way they managed to get through something like that before, they manage to get through it, and they think they're successful,
Right.
right? Remembered success is the biggest enemy of creativity, right? So the next slam comes. We just talk about the archetypal three slams, right? Then he's really is fumbling through his bag of tricks.
Mhm.
Eventually comes up with something, manages to, use a can opener to get out of the problem. And then the third, he's down for the count. There doesn't matter how many bag of tricks he goes through, whatever habit pattern, whatever um, way of self-justification or ego building, or none of it works. The universe has got its foot on his neck, and he has to transcend himself, and he has to pull something out of his own being that he didn't even know was there. And isn't that what we're talking about, creativity?
Nah, Genoa, you're so much fun. Isn't that what we're talking about? Like really, like annihilating, all patterns and tendencies and being real for half a second. Is that too much to ask? Well, come back next week when.
Well, it's like what I said in some class at one point, that the acceptance of limitation is the first step in transcendence. And she says, how could that possibly be the first step? I've been working with people for years to get them to the point where they could even recognize they have limitations. And then they have to go through a whole 10 years of work to get to the point of even considering, except, surrendering to their limitations in order to work with them. And I'm going to think, okay, that leads into the whole argument. Is enlightenment sudden or is it gradual? Well,
Oh, yeah.
it's gradual until it's sudden.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
but I think that first of all, you need to know that you can get there. And how are you going to know that? Right? How are you going to get there? You have to see yourself doing it. All of us have sometime during the day, we have that thing that happens to us where we surrender to our uncertainty and transcend ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
And one needs to kind of make friends with that experience, I think. And so yeah, you can design all kinds of these wonderful exercises that you design for people. It was so funny, you did this thing in Kauai. I didn't go to it, unfortunately. I kind of wish that I did, but Kota told me about it. And he said, well, it was like this cocktail party, and you're meant to, find somebody to talk to and then be able to move on and find somebody else to talk to. But your exercise in this few minutes that you're going to be talking to the person is to get them to give you a compliment. Do you remember this?
I do remember it now,
yeah. And he says, well, that wasn't very hard. I remember Laura said to me, oh, I saw Kota the other day. It was a little bit like seeing Jesus. So apparently that exercise was something that he knew all about, but I'm sure that there were other ones that he didn't.
Sure, right. It's the
and you are definitely putting people in that position.
Yeah.
Where, for some people, to talk to somebody for no more than 3 minutes, and in 3 minutes to even consider getting them to give you a compliment, that is like really outside their box. Really, it's a wonderful thing. Obviously you're doing this. You do this. This is what you do, right? You put people in the position where, it's like, in these subtle little ways, you're on your face in the adobe mud out here in New Mexico, and the universe has this boot heel on your neck in these little tiny ways, right? Where they have to make a leap of some kind. Yeah. And then how do you keep that going? Because, maybe people will do that in a workshop because of the vibe or because of the thing.
And then can you do that in real life and create your own parameters? So this is what I find fascinating is I was in a thing where I was having a deposition taken, where lawyers are there and the stenographer or whatever, and it was just like this regular conference room, and this, I forget who it was, maybe a lawyer, maybe a judge, I don't know, but they kind of like waved